making the second episode, this conversation with friends, writers. And I want to talk about the Pillow Book, book created by Japanese writer Sei Shōnagon, whose real name we unfortunately don't know. Sei Shōnagon is a combination of a nickname and a position, a government position that, according to records, she never had. So that's unfortunate. And it's part of what we know about this time of human history and history of Japan. We know that we don't know a lot. There are very few literary pieces that survive. There are very few records of how everything existed. And well, that also is part of why I picked the book. I was just curious about learning more about this period of time. And I think that's also a part that makes it very rewarding to read, because it's almost a different planet. It's a little world that is so far away from our existence, our today's reality, and that it feels like you are reading about extraterrestrial life. So, okay, this time I wanted to be more structured in my talk. So at the beginning I want to make the main point of today's conversation, what I learned from that book. So chapter 1 is what you can learn from the Pillow Book as a writer. Well, for me it was first it was a big surprise that a plotless book, a book without a plot, is just a little collection of different notes or anecdotes or little stories, that it can be so interesting, so engaging, so full of life. That was a surprise for me, and well, we'll touch on this later. And the second part was this that showing motivation and goals of your protagonist is very essential. Even if your novel or your story doesn't have a plot, even if it's a poem, we still want to connect to the protagonist as a human being. We want to know their motivation, why they're doing, why they're seeking what they're seeking, what drives their actions. I think it's very important. If we don't see that, it feels lifeless, like a dollhouse. And the third little point I wanted to make is that when you write from the first person perspective, you have to be honest with the reader. It is too easy to idealize that narrator and make them someone who feels almost superhuman, who can go into action and reflect on their actions at the same time, and speak in beautiful metaphors in the middle of something dreadful, which I perceive as a dishonesty, if I'm frank with you. So those were 3 points I wanted to touch more upon today during this conversation. And yes, a little note about the book itself. As I mentioned, Sei Shōnagon was a writer and also a noblewoman who lived at Japanese court in 10th century. I read this book in translation by Arthur Wally, and that was first published in 1928. So he translated it from Japanese to English, but you have to understand there are actually multiple layers of translations. It's not enough to just translate literal words into English. You also have to comment or some kind of explain the allusions they use, which are plenty. You also need to be creative about poetry. There's a lot of poems within the book that needed to be translated as well. And I imagine the different approaches of different translations could influence the book quite a lot. So I'm talking about this version created by Arthur Wally. If you happen to read something else, your impressions might be quite different. My first impression was that there was so much commentary in the beginning. He keeps on explaining the historical background and cultural background and how it was about religion and where they lived and how the political system worked. And then the court was not the heart of the political system of Japan of that time, but there was a family clan Fujiwara that held all the political powers in their family, and the court was more ceremonial place. But when you read it, it's just pages after pages, and you're like, okay, it's very interesting, but let me already dive into the book. And yeah, it feels almost too much, but otherwise it's very hard to understand what's going on. Because, for instance, that the court was very peaceful and serene place, what I could read from Sei Shōnagon's observations from her notes, and it explains itself when you understand that the whole political life happened elsewhere, and there it was mostly idle days spent in making new kimonos and writing poetry and making little excursions to listen to bird songs and to a monastery to listen to a priest or some kind of ceremony, to witness some kind of ceremony. And yeah, you pretty much need to go through the labor of reading the notes to build this picture brick by brick and see Japan in that period of time. And I found it a pretty interesting exercise for a fiction writer because it teaches you how to build a completely different worlds, how to add information, not maybe too much at the same time, but essential things little by little to make it more three-dimensional for the reader. Yes, so that was Heian period, and for me it was also very informative. When thinking about old Japan, I saw the samurai culture, people with katanas, like long swords, roaming the land and picking fights. But that was before. What Sei Shōnagon writes was before the samurai culture, before the pride culture that was probably developed somewhere else and then imported in Japan. Because we see it in histories of other countries as well. And there is another book that was written at the same period of time, and the authors knew each other. It is the tale of Genji by Murasaki Shikubu. They knew each other. They both were noble women, and I think they met at the court. But the tale of Genji is fiction, and you have to read it as fiction. So it's all completely created in the writer's mind. When what Sei Shōnagon writes is little observations and her reality. It's a very important note that it was her reality, not someone else's, because some peculiarities that you can pick from there. How one time she observes people, work class people eating, and she says, "This is not civil. You shouldn't, put big chunks of food into your mouth like that. You eat like animals." But then I realized as a reader, like, she has never seen a really truly hungry person before. That's a cute moment, and the book is full of them. Why I would recommend this book to anyone, not only people who are aspiring to be writers themselves, but anyone who is curious about different cultures, is first, yes, because it is a different historical period and you learn a lot from it. And second, also you learn how social norms change. I find it very useful to remind ourselves that what we consider normal was not always that. And that what we consider marriage was not always the same type of arrangements there before. Like the writer describes the custom of the marriage. It's most, if I translate it to today's reality, it would be like a guest marriage. You invite a man into your house, and then he visits you for 3 nights in a row, and then your family decides that, well, you now formed a unit. They make a little feast to celebrate it, and from that point, it is universally understood that you two are a married couple. But it doesn't mean that he comes to live with you. He keeps on visiting sometime, when it is when it is convenient to him, and sometimes a woman finds herself without a man because he's not visiting anymore, and sometimes he has more than one woman to visit. There is such a social role as a lover, and it is okay to have a lover and a secret love affair. He comes at night and he leaves before the sunrise, or right at the moment of the sunrise. It's very cute. It's very cute to just compare their reality to what we consider normal. I also adore how she describes her expectations of a good lover, how he has to be considerate and give her compliments, tell her nice things about how he enjoyed spending time together, and not make too much noise when dressing yourself up in the morning, and not make it like he's getting ready for an expedition, just trying to find his way. It has to have the air of intimacy, we are still there. It is still a date, so please behave accordingly. And then there is a very, very nice custom. I think we should adopt that. how you act after a date. You spend night together, for instance, and in the morning he goes home, and the woman maybe wants to sleep a little bit more, and then he has to write her a poem, and a memento or appreciation for the date they had, like a little text message. I had such a good time. And it doesn't have to be a poem written by him, because part of the culture was a couple of poetry collections that everyone read, memorized, recited, and it served almost like a different language, a language of poetry. So he writes you a little poem, and then you also reply to that, and then he replies to the reply, and that's it. You don't have more expectations, and very transparent. You know what to do after a date, how to say thank you, I had a very good time. Coming back to the thought on importance on the motivation. I think the author of this book, the Pillow book, she omitted things about herself on purpose. In one of the notes, she says that her notes found its way to other people. They were borrowed without permission. And of course, she didn't want to reveal too much about herself. So I can imagine there were not so many books, and reading something new, even if it's just someone else's letter, it was the only, maybe for some people, the only available type of entertainment. So of course they would. And that might be a reason why she didn't tell a lot about her own desires, her own wishes. What did she want? It is clear that she wanted to be friends with the Empress, Sadako, but beyond that, what? Did she want to be a lady the favorite lady in waiting? Did she want to stay at the court forever? Did she want to distinguish herself as a writer? It is not very clear. And I just made a mental note to include this and to think about this more when I write, because I'm guilty of this for sure. I noticed that my protagonist, a lot of the time, they're just floating in life. They're floating and reacting to some very big problems, too large to ignore, but they do not express any agency, any strong will or strong desire to achieve something, to do something. Guilt is charged. And on the third note, yes, writing from the first person is also challenging, because at some point you might end up merging yourself with the protagonist, and there is very little distance from you, your personality, and the protagonist, which sometimes is needed, because then you assume that everything is clear. Why I'm doing what the protagonist is doing, what they are doing is clear, and who are they as a person is also quite clear. I don't need to make it more apparent, but it's not always that. And what I also found difficult is how to find a balance, because if you're narrating from the first person, then who is reflecting on your actions. If you do everything at the same time, going into solving a problem and also reflecting on why you're doing and what you want to achieve, and also describing what's happening in a nice poetic way, that looks unrealistic. People don't do that. People are one direction or one task at a time. They have limited mental capacity, and yeah, it's just you want the reader to relate to the story, so make it a little bit more realistic. That's what I think. Yes. Well, about our Japanese writer, I think she did a brilliant job. And maybe in the future I find more energy and more mental capacity to go through this building of different world in old Japan, and then I will read the tale of Genji by Murasaki Shikubu. Then we'll come back to this episode. All right, but now with this, the first chapter is done, and then the second chapter of today's talk is an afterthought, as usual. It's a very little note for me too. I have to confess, I consider the epistolary novel and memoir as sort of lesser genre, because they're so personal. I always thought, okay, when you don't have any ideas, okay, then you can write about yourself. But I think I was wrong. I mean, obviously I was wrong on this, because it is a different way to connect to your reader. It is a different way to find intimacy with the reader and with yourself too. To do this self-exploration on certain events, on certain things that caught your attention, on the way you perceive the world around you. And it's sort of like a mental undressing when you remove one layer after another layer and discover what sits underneath all this. It must be very difficult. I must say I'm not ready to do this personally. But on that note, I'm also working on a series of creative non-fiction short stories, and I'm going to publish them on Substack on the same name. It is Angry Mouse Writing Club, but on Substack. So let's see how that goes. All right, that's all for today. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you again on this channel. Bye bye.